My parents sold my grandma's 1896 Steinway to buy my sister a Mercedes while Grandma was in hospice. She made one phone call and said, "Sunday at my house. Bring the deed. You know, there are some wounds so deep, so gut-wrenching, they leave you breathless. But what if those wounds aren't from a stranger, but from the very people who were supposed to love and protect you? What if they steal your inheritance, buy your sister a luxury car with it, and then threaten to destroy you if you dare to speak up?" That's exactly what happened to me. They thought Grandma was too sick to ever find out, that I was too broken to ever fight back. They were wrong. And when I finally told her, Grandma didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply picked up her phone, dialed one number, and uttered 7 words that would shatter their entire world. What those words were, and what went down at my mother's 62nd birthday party, is a story I promise you won't forget. It all started on a Tuesday afternoon. I was still buzzing from my last piano lesson of the day when the call came. "Margaret has had another heart attack." My father's voice, devoid of any warmth, cut through the quiet. "She's stable, but they're transferring her to hospice. Family meeting at the hospital in 90 minutes. No, hello, how are you? No, this must be hard. Just logistics." I dropped everything. When I got there, my parents and my sister, Haley, were already huddled in a corner. My dad, Thomas Bennett, arms crossed, looking important. My mom, Claire Bennett, gripping her designer purse like it was the only thing holding her together. And Haley, 5 years younger, always the favorite, just scrolling on her phone, barely looking up. "Good. You're here," my dad said, as if I was late for a chore. "We need to distribute responsibilities. Not, how are you holding up? Not, this must be difficult. Just tasks. Someone should visit Mother every day. Claire and I have a business to run." Haley is in a critical situation with Carter Reynolds' family. Carter Reynolds, Haley's boyfriend for 9 months, was the son of my father's main business partner. Of course. "So, Natalie," he turned to me, his gaze flat. "You'll handle the visits. Your schedule is flexible. Teachers don't typically work overtime." I wanted to scream. To tell him I teach 42 children every week, run after-school programs, that my time has value too. But I just swallowed it. "Of course," I replied quietly. "I want to be with her anyway." "Perfect." He'd already turned away. "Keep us updated if anything changes." As I walked towards Grandma's room, I heard my mother's voice, meant only for Haley, drift down the hall. "At least she's useful for something." I kept walking. I didn't turn around. Not because I hadn't heard, but because I'd gotten used to that kind of pain. I'd stopped expecting it to be acknowledged. Grandma Margaret Whitmore's room smelled of lavender and old books. She insisted on both. "They try to make everything smell like antiseptic," she'd grumbled on my first visit. "I refuse. If I'm going to die, I want to do so surrounded by the things I care about." She was 78, sharp as a blade, and dying from congestive heart failure. Doctors gave her 6 weeks, maybe 2 or 3 months if she was lucky. I went every day after school. We talked about music, about her performing days in concert halls, about my students who couldn't read notes but could feel rhythm in their bones. One evening, she reached for my hand. Her grip was weaker, but her eyes were fierce. "Natalie, I need you to know something." "Anything, Grandma." "The Steinway." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "My mother's piano, from 1896. I knew that piano. I'd learned scales on its ivory keys when I was 8. It was the soundtrack to my childhood, the only place in my family where I truly felt understood." "It's yours," she stated, her voice firm. "I already told Thomas and Claire last month, in front of everyone. That piano belongs to you." I remembered. My father's jaw had tightened. My mother and Haley had exchanged eye rolls, Haley muttering something about sentimental junk. "Grandma, you don't have to." "I want to." She squeezed my hand. "You're the only one who knows what it means. Promise me you'll take care of it." "I promise." She smiled then, a knowing smile that had secrets I couldn't grasp. There are some things more valuable than money, child, and some people who need to learn that lesson the hard way. 3 weeks later, everything changed. Grandma had asked me to bring some old photos from her house, from her performing days. I still had a key, so I drove over on a rainy Thursday afternoon. The house was too quiet. I walked through the foyer, past the dining room, and into the living room where the Steinway had stood for 3 decades. The space was empty. My breath caught in my throat. Where the piano should have been, There was only a rectangular indent in the carpet, a ghost of something violently removed. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone. Mom. My voice cracked. Where is Grandma's piano? A pause. My mother's voice, casual, dismissive. Your father handled it. Nat, it's time to get serious. You shouldn't be concerned about it. Handled what? Where is it? I said, don't worry about it, Nat. Click. She hung up. I stood in that empty room for what felt like hours, staring at the carpet, rain pattering outside. Thunder rumbled in the distance. I drove to my parents' house that evening. My father answered the door, scotch in hand, looking annoyed by the interruption. The piano, I managed. What have you done? He didn't even flinch. We sold it. Got $12,500 for it. Good price. The entire world tilted. You sold it? Grandma said it was mine. Grandma's dying, Nat. He took a sip of his drink. She doesn't need a piano. And neither do you. Behind him, I heard the jingle of car keys. Haley appeared in the hallway, grinning. New keys for a new car. You bought her a car? My voice was flat. With Grandma's piano? My father shrugged, as if I'd asked about the weather. Mercedes-Benz. Haley needs to make a good impression on Reynolds. Carter's family is very particular about appearances. That piano was supposed to be mine. So what would you do with it? My mother appeared behind my father, arms crossed. You teach children's music classes. Nat, you don't perform. You don't have the space. Haley needed the money for her future. Her future. I repeated the words, the bitterness a metallic taste. Haley walked into the foyer, swinging her new keys like a trophy. Don't get jealous, Nat. It's not a good look. Maybe if you'd picked a better career, you could afford nice things too. I looked at them. My parents, my sister, the life they'd built where I was always an afterthought, my needs last. Does Grandma know? Silence. Is she aware you sold her piano? My mother's expression hardened. She's in hospice, Natalie. She takes morphine half the time. She doesn't need to know anything that will make her upset. Or you don't want her to know? I mean, my mother stepped closer, her voice turning cold, menacing. That if you tell her, and it causes her stress, and something bad happens, it will be your fault. Do you want to be held accountable for killing your grandmother? The accusation hung in the air like poison. I should have backed down. The old Natalie would have. But something had changed inside me. Something had finally snapped. Grandma deserves to know what happened to her property. I said quietly, my voice surprisingly steady. And I will not lie to her. I turned and walked away before they could reply. I didn't sleep that night. My apartment felt smaller, a modest one-bedroom my parents had always mocked as poor lifestyle choices. I sat on my second-hand couch, looking at a framed photo of Grandma Margaret. Her final concert, 22 years ago. Her fingers poised above the keys, her face luminous. That same piano, which they had sold as if it were nothing. My mother's words circled in my mind. If something happens, it will be your responsibility. Was she right? Would the shock be too much? Would I be causing her more pain? But then I remembered what Grandma had always taught me. When I was 12 and didn't want to tell my parents I'd failed a math test, she said, the truth can hurt, but lies always cause deeper wounds. They just take longer to appear. I pulled my knees to my chest, thinking of my 29 years. Every time I'd kept quiet to maintain peace. Every time I'd accepted less because fighting felt futile. Every time I'd made myself smaller so my family could feel larger. And where had it led me? Here. Alone, invisible, watching them erase Grandma's wishes as if her words meant nothing. If I stayed silent now, I wouldn't be keeping the peace. I'd be complicit. By 2:40 a.m., I made my decision. Grandma deserved the truth. She deserved to know her son had stolen from her, lied to her, and thought she was too weak to matter. And maybe, just maybe, I deserved to stop apologizing for my existence. I set an alarm for early morning. I would visit hospice before school. I'd tell her everything. When I arrived, Grandma was awake, propped against her pillows, watching the sunrise. You look like you haven't slept, she said softly. I haven't. I pulled a chair to her bed, taking her hand. Grandma, I have to tell you something, and it's going to hurt. Despite everything, her eyes, still so sharp, studied my face. Then tell me. So I did. The empty space in her living room. The $12,500. The Mercedes-Benz gleaming with Haley's name. My father's casual dismissal. My mother's terrifying threat. I told her everything, bracing myself for tears, for shock, for the kind of devastation that would shatter what remained of her fragile heart. Instead, Grandma Margaret exhaled slowly. Not a gasp of pain, not a scream of betrayal, just a sigh. A sigh from someone who knew exactly what was about to happen. "Grandma," I whispered. She turned to me, her expression not one of grief, but calm, almost resigned. "I knew this might happen, sweetheart. Did you know? I know my son." Her voice was steady. "I've watched him become this for 42 years. I hoped he would change, but I was also ready for the possibility that he would not." My mind raced. "Ready? How?" She didn't answer directly. Instead, she reached for her bedside table. "Could you hand me my phone?" I passed it to her, perplexed. She quickly scrolled, found a name, and pressed call. Then she put it on speaker. 3 rings. Then a deep, measured male voice. "How are you feeling, Margaret?" "I'm dying, Graham. But I'm clear-headed, and it's time." A pause. "I understand. When?" "Sunday. Claire's birthday party. At my house. I'll prepare the documents." "Thank you, old friend." She ended the call and gave me a knowing smile. "Grandma." I stared at her. "Who is Graham?" "Graham Whitaker," she said, gently placing the phone down. "My attorney for 32 years. He was your grandfather's close friend. Do you have your own attorney?" Her eyes twinkled despite her exhaustion. "I have many things your father doesn't know about, Natalie. Thomas assumes he knows everything about my affairs. He has always assumed. That's his greatest weakness." I felt like I was standing on the edge of something vast, peering into depths I couldn't see. "What's going on at Mom's birthday party this Sunday?" "Justice." Grandma squeezed my hand. "Delayed perhaps, but justice nonetheless." "I don't understand." "You don't need to understand everything just yet." She leaned back, looking tired. "I just need you to do one thing for me. Anything. Come to the party. Dress nicely. And bring your patience." A ghostly smile. "The kind of patience I taught you when you were learning Chopin and wanted to throw the sheet music across the room." I almost laughed despite everything. "Is it that bad?" "Worse." Her expression softened. "But necessary. Your father and mother need to understand that their actions have consequences. And I've spent the last 6 years ensuring that when the lesson comes, it will be unforgettable." 6 years. She had been planning this for 6 years. "Grandma, what have you done?" She closed her eyes, exhaustion taking over. "I protected you, sweetheart, as I should have all along. I'm just sorry I took so long to act." I sat with her until she fell asleep, my thoughts a whirlwind of questions. Graham Whitaker. Sunday. My mother's birthday party. At Grandma's house. Something was going to change. I could feel it. I just didn't know what. 2 days later, I was in a small law office on the outskirts of Philadelphia. Graham Whitaker was not what I'd expected. In his early 70s, silver hair, gold-rimmed glasses. His movements were slow, precise. His office smelled of old leather and paper, lined floor to ceiling with legal volumes. "Natalie Bennett." He held out his hand. "Your grandmother talks about you constantly. Nice to finally meet you." "Mr. Whitaker, Graham, please." He motioned to a chair. "Sit. Your grandmother asked me to explain a few things before Sunday." I sat, my hands trembling slightly. "Your grandmother is a remarkable woman," Graham began. "She's also far more astute than her children realize. She has been observing and planning." "Planning what, exactly?" He folded his hands on the desk. "Tell me, Natalie, do you know who owns the house where your parents live?" "They do. Grandma gave it to them after Grandpa died." Graham's expression didn't change. "Is that what you were told?" "It's what everyone says." "Everyone's wrong." He took a folder from his drawer and slid it across to me. "Your grandmother let Thomas and Claire live in that house for free, but she never transferred ownership. Not legally. Not ever." I stared at the document, the property deed. Margaret Whitmore's name, clear as day. No transfer. No amendment. "They've been living in her house for 11 years, I said slowly, assuming it was theirs. "Precisely." My head was spinning. Why would Grandma let them believe? Because she was watching, Natalie. Graham leaned in. She waited to see if her son would prove her fears wrong. Unfortunately, he did exactly as she expected. That night, I went home and searched. Grandma had given me a box of old belongings years ago, photos, letters, pressed flowers. I'd never thoroughly looked through it. It felt too intimate, like reading someone's diary. But I needed answers. At the bottom, beneath concert programs, I found it. An old, yellowed, sealed envelope. My name was written in Grandma's elegant script, with 6 words underneath. For Natalie, when you need to understand. My fingers quivered as I opened it. Inside, a single photograph, a copy of a legal document. The header was obscured, but Grandma's signature was at the bottom, dated 6 years ago. A note, in her handwriting, was clipped to the corner. The house never left my possession, sweetheart. It was only borrowed. And some borrowers do not deserve the benefit. I reread it 3 times. Then I understood. Sunday's party was at Grandma's house. My parents treated it as their own. They'd hosted countless parties there. They'd sold the piano that sat in the living room as if it belonged to them. But it didn't. It never had. My father's entire sense of status was built on a non-existent foundation. I remembered all the times he'd lectured me on real assets and sound investments. All the times he'd mocked my small apartment while standing in a house he didn't even own. The irony was almost too perfect. I tucked the letter back into its envelope. Sunday was 4 days away. Whatever Grandma had planned, it would take place in the very territory my parents had claimed as their own. And they had no idea. The night before the party, Grandma called. Her voice was weaker, each word an effort, but her mind was razor sharp. Natalie, are you prepared for tomorrow? I think so. I paused. Are you sure about this, Grandma? It's Mom's birthday. In front of all those people. That's precisely why it needs to be tomorrow. She took a slow breath. Your father sold my piano in front of everybody. He announced it at last month's family dinner as if it was his decision. He didn't ask me. He didn't think about you. He assumed I was too weak and you were too quiet to matter. I closed my eyes. I remember. Then you understand why the lesson needs witnesses. Her voice softened. I am not doing this for vengeance, sweetheart. Revenge is meaningless. I'm doing this because it's right, and you deserve to be safe, especially after I leave. Tears streamed down my face. Grandma, I should have acted sooner. I watched how they treated you for years and hoped Thomas would change. That was my mistake. Love blinded me for far too long. This is not your fault. Perhaps not entirely, but I can still make things right. A pause. I don't have much time left, Natalie. The doctors say 6 weeks, but I believe it's less. I can feel it, and I need to know. Do you trust me? Always. Then come tomorrow. We're something that will make you feel strong. And no matter what happens, remember that you are not the villain in this story. You never were. We said goodnight. I held the phone against my chest for a long time. Nothing would be the same tomorrow. I just had to be willing to let go. Sunday dawned with pale winter sunlight. Grandma's house, my parents' borrowed home, looked almost festive. Someone had hung a happy 62nd birthday Claire Bennett banner across the porch. Cars lined the driveway, spilling onto the street. I parked at the far end and sat for a moment, gathering myself. I wore a navy blue dress, simple pearl earrings Grandma had given me for my 22nd birthday. My hair was neatly pinned back. Armor for a battle I didn't quite understand. The house was buzzing with maybe 30, 40 guests. Aunts, uncles, old neighbors, some of my father's business associates. I spotted Mr. Reynolds near the fireplace with Carter, Haley on his arm. My eyes immediately went to the living room. The corner where the Steinway had stood for 3 decades was now empty. Someone had placed a large potted plant there to fill the void. It looked ridiculous. A leafy green apology for something that couldn't be apologized away. My mother stood near the dining table in a red designer gown, accepting compliments like a queen being honored. My father worked the room with practiced charm. Graham Whitaker sat in the far corner, almost invisible, his leather briefcase beside him. He caught my eye from across the room and gave an almost imperceptible nod. I nodded back. My Aunt Lillian, Grandma's younger sister, appeared beside me. Natalie, sweetheart, how's Margaret doing? Tired, I admitted, but still sharp. She was always the smart one. Aunt Lillian's gaze shifted to the empty corner. I noticed the piano is gone. Thomas said Margaret wanted to sell it. I opened my mouth to respond, but my father's voice cut through the crowd. Everyone, if I could have your attention, please. He stood in the center of the living room, crystal glass raised, commanding the space as if he owned it, which I now realized he did not. Today we celebrate 62 wonderful years of Claire Bennett. Applause. My mother beamed. And I also want to share some exciting family news. As some of you know, our daughter Haley has been seeing Carter Reynolds, the son of my dear friend and partner, Victor. He gestured to Carter, who smiled politely. And to celebrate her bright future, we have a special surprise. He led the party outside where a gleaming silver Mercedes-Benz sat in the driveway, a red bow on its hood. A gift, my father proudly declared, made possible by Grandma Margaret's generosity. She sold her antique piano to provide for her granddaughter's future. Haley shrieked, wrapped her arms around my father, and posed for photos next to the car. I stood frozen on the porch. He was doing it again, rewriting the story, making himself the hero, completely ignoring Grandma's wishes. A woman I didn't recognize leaned to her husband. Wasn't the piano supposed to go to the other granddaughter who teaches music? Her husband shrugged. Guess plans changed. Aunt Lillian appeared beside me, her face pale. Natalie, did Margaret actually agree to this? Before I could respond, Haley spotted me. Natalie, she called out, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Come take a photo. Don't get jealous. I'm sure Grandma will leave something for you, too. Perhaps an old collection of sheet music. Scattered laughter. My hands were shaking. My vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall. Then, behind me, I heard a briefcase click open. Everyone was filing back inside, but Aunt Lillian blocked my father's path. Thomas. Her voice was steady, though her hands trembled slightly. I need to ask you something. My father's smile didn't falter. Can it wait, Lillian? We're in the middle of. Did you ask Margaret before selling the piano? The question landed like a stone in still water. Conversations nearby came to a halt. Mother is in hospice, my father stated calmly. She's not in a position to make these kinds of decisions. We did our best for her. I spoke to her this morning. Aunt Lillian's voice gained strength. She's clear-headed, Thomas. Perfectly clear. And she said you never asked her permission. You never even told her. More people were listening now. Mr. Reynolds frowned. Carter shifted uncomfortably. My mother pushed forward, her face flushed. Lillian, it's my birthday. Let's not cause a scene. A scene. Aunt Lillian laughed, but it wasn't funny. Claire, your husband sold Margaret's most valuable possession without her knowledge and spent the money on a car. If anyone's causing a scene, it's not me. The room had gone quiet. 34 pairs of eyes darted between my aunt and my parents. My father's composure cracked slightly. This is a family matter. It doesn't have to be discussed in public. Actually, a new voice said from behind us. I think public is exactly where it needs to be discussed. I turned. Graham Whitaker. Standing there, briefcase open, a folder of documents in his hand. He walked calmly to the center of the room, as if he'd done this 1,000 times. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Graham Whitaker. I am Margaret Whitmore's attorney. My father's face turned white. The silence was suffocating. Graham took up a position near the empty corner where the piano once stood. It felt deliberate. I apologize for interrupting the celebration, he said, his voice easily heard. But Margaret Whitmore has asked me to address some urgent matters regarding her estate. Given the circumstances, she felt it was important that her family, and those close to them, hear this directly. My father found his voice first. My mother has an attorney? Since when? Since 32 years ago, Thomas. Graham's tone was polite, yet cutting. I also represented your father. You would know this if you had bothered to ask. Muffled gasps. Someone in the back whispered, "Oh my God." My mother stepped forward. Margaret is dying. She's not in her right mind. Whatever papers you have. Graham raised a hand to silence her. I saw Margaret this morning. Her nurse, Nancy, confirms that she is fully competent and lucid. She dictated detailed instructions for today's meeting. He opened the folder and took out a document. Now, I understand there's been some confusion about property ownership, so let me clarify. He held up the paper. This is the deed to the house we are currently standing in. I watched my father's face lose all color. Note the name on the deed. Margaret Whitmore. Not Thomas Bennett. Not Claire Bennett. Graham paused, letting the words sink in. This house was never transferred. It was never a gift. Your parents have lived here rent-free for 11 years. Thanks to Margaret's generosity. Nothing more. The room erupted with whispers. My father grabbed the edge of a chair to steady himself. Haley stared at her father, confusion and panic etched on her face. And Graham Whitaker wasn't finished. That, he said quietly, is just the beginning. My father's voice cracked. This is impossible. Mother claimed the house was ours. She promised. She promised you could live here. Graham placed the deed on the dining table for everyone to see. She never promised ownership. There is a significant legal difference, Mr. Bennett. I watched realization spread like wildfire. Mr. Reynolds took a small step away from my father. A neighbor shared a knowing look with her husband. For 11 years, Graham continued, you've enjoyed this property without paying rent, utilities, or property taxes, which are all covered by Margaret's accounts. You've treated it like your own. You've even made changes without permission. He glanced at the modern light fixtures my mother had installed last year. Legally, you are tenants at will, and the property owner has the right to terminate that arrangement at any time. You can't be serious. My mother's voice was shrill. We've lived here for over a decade. We've made an investment in this house. Invested without authorization. Graham's expression remained unchanged. Any improvements you've made without written consent belong to the property owner, Margaret Whitmore. Haley grabbed Carter's arm. This is insane. Dad, tell them this is a joke. My father couldn't speak. He looked at the deed as if it were a death warrant. I should also mention, Graham said almost casually, that Pennsylvania law takes property fraud very seriously. Representing someone else's property as your own, especially in business situations, can have serious legal ramifications. Mr. Reynolds' expression shifted from confusion to cold calculation. He no longer saw my father as a partner, but a liability. My father's empire, built on borrowed prestige, was crumbling before our eyes. And Graham still had more documents in his folder. Now, Graham said, pulling out a second document, we come to the matter of trust. What trust? My father's voice was barely a whisper. Margaret Whitmore established a separate trust 6 years ago, independent of the will that was shared with your family. This trust was established specifically to safeguard her most valuable assets in the event of, he paused delicately, financial misconduct. Financial misconduct? My mother sputtered. We're her family. Family members can still commit misconduct, Mrs. Bennett, as recent events have demonstrated. Graham withdrew a thick document. Per the terms of this trust, the following assets are irrevocably assigned to a single beneficiary. The property we're standing in, Margaret's financial accounts, and all items of sentimental value, including the 1896 Steinway piano that was recently sold without authorization. He looked up, his gaze fixed on me. The sole beneficiary is Natalie Rose Bennett. The room went silent. Haley's shriek shattered it. What? This is fraudulent. She was manipulated. My father yelled, pointing at me, his face contorted in rage. That little. Thomas. Graham's voice was ice. I would advise you to choose your next words carefully. More than 34 people have witnessed everything said here today. Aunt Lillian came to stand beside me, her hand grasping mine and squeezing. Margaret knew exactly what she was doing, Graham explained. She spent 6 years watching and waiting, hoping her son would prove her wrong. Instead, he sold her most prized possession to purchase a car for her granddaughter, who never visits her. He paused. Mr. Bennett, actions have consequences. This is yours. My mother was crying now. Haley looked sick. I couldn't move, breathe, or believe what I was hearing. Graham waited for the chaos to subside. Regarding the piano sale, he retrieved an additional document. Since the Steinway was part of the trust and Natalie is the designated beneficiary, the sale, conducted without the trustee's consent, that's Margaret, constitutes unauthorized disposal of trust assets. What does that mean? Haley's voice was small. It means the $12,500 must be returned to the trust within 45 days. Graham swept his gaze over my parents and sister. Failure to comply may result in civil litigation for misappropriation of trust property. Given the clear paper trail, I assure you that the outcome will not be favorable to your family. My father laughed, a hollow, desperate sound. We don't have $12,500 sitting around. The money went to the car. Then I suggest you find a way to liquidate that asset. Graham nodded toward the window where the Mercedes, red bow and all, was still visible. The dealer might accept a return, though you'll likely take a significant loss. Haley burst into tears. My car? Are you taking my car? I'm not taking anything, Miss Bennett, Graham said calmly. I'm simply explaining the legal consequences of your family's choices. I saw Haley look to Carter for support, but he had already moved away from her, his face carefully neutral. His father was whispering something in his ear, and neither of them looked sympathetic. Additionally, Graham continued, Margaret has asked me to inform you that your living arrangements in this house will be formally restructured. You may stay here temporarily, but a valid lease agreement will be required. A lease? My mom's voice was barely audible. In the house where we've lived for 11 years? In the house, Graham gently corrected, that you never owned. The room had become deathly quiet. Every eye was on me. My father turned slowly, his face contorted with betrayal and rage. You did it. You poisoned her against us. I stood my ground. No, father. I didn't do anything. My voice was more stable than I expected. My grandmother made these decisions 6 years ago, before I knew anything about them. I just found out this week. Liar. My mother's voice was venomous. You've always been jealous of Haley and our family's success. This is your vengeance. Vengeance. Something cold and hard crystallized within me. I didn't sell Grandma's piano without asking her first. I didn't spend the money on my own car. I didn't lie to everyone about what happened. I took a step forward, looking directly at my mother. I didn't say at least she's useful for something when I agreed to visit Grandma every day. I am not the person who hung up on me when I asked questions. And I am not the one who threatened to kill Grandma if I told her the truth. Gasps echoed. Aunt Lillian's hand tightened around mine. I spent 29 years being invisible in this family. My voice remained steady. I accepted it because I believe that's what love required. Shrink yourself to make others comfortable. I looked at my father, my mother, and Haley, still crying over her doomed Mercedes. But Grandma taught me something different. She taught me that loving yourself means standing up for what is right, even if it costs you everything. I took a breath. So, this is what I want you to understand. I'm not sorry anymore. I refuse to remain silent any longer, and I'm over pretending everything is fine when it isn't. The room was completely still. As the crowd dispersed, slowly and awkwardly, whispering goodbyes and avoiding eye contact, Graham pulled me aside. Natalie, we need to discuss next steps. I nodded, feeling surreal, like I was watching myself from outside my body. Legally, you have several options, he said softly, for only me to hear. You could demand an immediate eviction. Given the circumstances, your grandmother would support whatever decision you make. I looked across the room at my parents. My father had collapsed into a chair, head in his hands. My mother stood frozen by the window, mascara streaking her face. Haley had vanished, probably outside mourning her Mercedes. They looked broken. A small part of me wanted to twist the knife, to make them feel every ounce of the pain they had caused me over the previous 29 years. But that's not who I wanted to be. I don't want to throw them out, I explained slowly. Not immediately. Graham raised an eyebrow. Are you sure? Yes. I drew a breath. Here's what I want. The $12,500 returned within 120 days, not 45. I'll give them time to sell the car and sort things out. They can stay in the house under a formal lease agreement for a low rent. After Grandma, I swallowed hard. They will have 15 months to find another place to live. That's remarkably generous, given everything. Maybe. I met his gaze. But I'm not doing this to punish them. I'm doing it because it's right, and I refuse to be the person they are. Graham gave me a long look. He nodded, a hint of respect in his expression. Your grandmother predicted you'd react this way. She's very proud of you, Natalie. I know. My voice broke. I know she is. Aunt Lillian and 2 of the remaining guests witnessed the agreement being drafted right there on the dining room table. My father signed without looking at me. My mother's hand shook so much she could barely hold the pen. Neither of them said anything. The house was empty by the time the last signature was placed. Mr. Reynolds and Carter had departed without saying goodbye. I later learned Carter had driven away while Haley was still crying outside. The birthday cake remained untouched. The banner drooped sadly from the porch. Aunt Lillian hugged me tightly before leaving. You did the right thing, sweetheart. Margaret would be very proud. She is proud, I stated softly. I talked to her this morning. As if on cue, my phone vibrated. A video call request from Grandma's hospice number. I walked to the empty corner of the living room where the piano used to be. Her face appeared on screen, pale but calm. Nurse Nancy was smiling in the background. Grandma's voice was weak, but warm. My brave girl. How are you feeling? Terrified, I admitted, and relieved and sad all at once. That is how courage feels, sweetheart. It is never comfortable. I didn't throw them out. I gave them time. I know. Graham had texted her. Her eyes glistened. Natalie, you're a better person than they deserve. But that is why I chose you. I pressed my hand against the screen, wishing I could hold hers instead. Thank you, Grandma. For everything. For protecting me. Don't thank me. Her smile was tinged with sadness. Just live well. Play music. Be happy. That is how you thank me. I will. I know you will, sweetheart. She closed her eyes. I know you will. I know many of you are probably thinking, so that's it? Did your parents ever change? The honest answer is complicated. Not every story has a perfect ending, but every story has a lesson. The first week after the party was chaos. News travels fast in small social circles, and the story of what happened at Claire Bennett's 62nd birthday spread like wildfire. My father's business partners suddenly became unavailable for meetings. Old friends stopped returning calls. Mr. Reynolds formally withdrew from the joint venture they'd been planning. When my father demanded an explanation, the response was cold. I can't do business with someone I can't trust, Thomas. If you deceive your own mother, what would you do to a partner? The deal, worth over $240,000, was gone in an instant. Haley had to return the Mercedes. The dealership only offered her $87,500, $15,000 less than my parents had paid. She screamed at the salesman for 20 minutes before finally signing the paperwork. Carter broke up with her 4 days later via text message. My family thinks it's best if we take some time apart, the message read. Translation: they wanted nothing to do with the Bennett family drama. My sister, who had always been the golden child, found herself suddenly ordinary. No car, no wealthy boyfriend, no special status. She had to borrow my mother's old Honda to get to job interviews. I didn't gloat. I didn't reach out. I simply went about my life, teaching piano to my students, visiting Grandma every evening. But I'd be lying if I said there wasn't some quiet satisfaction in watching the facades crumble. My father had spent years measuring success in appearances, the house, the car, the right connections. Now he was learning that none of it had ever been real. The foundation he'd built his identity on was borrowed, and borrowed things always have to be returned. 3 weeks after the birthday party, hospice called me at 5:30 a.m. You should come now, the nurse said gently. She's asking for you. I drove faster than I should have, my heart pounding. Grandma's room was quiet when I arrived. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting soft golden shadows across her bed. Her breathing was shallow, her face paper thin, but her eyes were open. And when she saw me, she smiled. My Natalie. Her voice was barely a whisper. Come sit with me. I took her hand. It felt so fragile, like holding a bird. I have something to tell you, she said slowly. Something I should have said years ago. What is it, Grandma? I'm sorry. A tear slipped down her cheek. For not acting sooner. I watched how they treated you year after year. I kept hoping Thomas would change, that Claire would see your value. I made excuses because I didn't want to believe my own son could be. She trailed off. It's not your fault, I said, my own tears streaming. Perhaps not entirely, but I could have done more. I could have protected you sooner instead of waiting until I was dying. She barely squeezed my hand. I apologize, sweetheart. You deserved better. You gave me everything that mattered, I declared vehemently. Music, love, the realization that I was worth something. That is more than they ever gave me. She smiled, and for a moment, she reminded me of my grandmother from childhood. Strong, radiant, full of life. I'm so proud of you, Natalie. You have a good heart, but you finally learned to protect it. You taught me that. Then I did something right. Her eyes fluttered shut. I am tired now, sweetheart. Stay with me. Grandma Margaret died peacefully that evening, holding my hand and hers. The funeral took place 6 days later at the small church she'd attended for 52 years. It was as simple as she had wished. No elaborate flowers, no ostentatious displays, just music, memories, and people who genuinely loved her. I played the piano at the service. It wasn't the Steinway, that was gone, but a modest upright the church had owned for decades. I played Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, the first piece Grandma ever taught me. The church was halfway full. Aunt Lillian sat in the front row, holding tissues. Several pews were filled with Grandma's former performing friends. White-haired women who remembered when Margaret Whitmore's name meant something in the world of classical music. My parents sat at the back. They did not approach me before the service, during it, or afterward. My mother wore dark sunglasses that covered her eyes. My father stared straight ahead, as if he were attending his own sentencing. Haley wasn't there at all. Too emotionally fragile, my mother had replied to someone who inquired. I gave the eulogy. I talked about Grandma's music, her wisdom, her quiet strength. I mentioned how she taught me that love isn't about grand gestures. It's about showing up every day and deciding to see someone for who they truly are. I didn't mention the drama. The funeral wasn't the appropriate setting. Following the service, my father began walking towards me. I saw him pause, take a step, then stop when my mother grabbed his arm and drew him away. He never managed to cross the room. Perhaps he wanted to apologize. Perhaps not. I will never know. But I'd already accepted that some apologies never come and others are no longer necessary. 7 months later, I moved into Grandma's home. It felt strange at first, walking through rooms infused with her presence, sleeping in the guest bedroom I'd known since childhood. But gradually, it began to feel like home. I used some of the returned funds to purchase a new piano, not a Steinway, which costs much more than $12,500, but a lovely Yamaha Grand that filled the space where Grandma's piano once stood. Different, but meaningful in its own right. A new beginning. I started teaching private lessons on weekends. My first student was Aunt Lillian's granddaughter, Olivia, 9 years old, bright-eyed, and with the same impatient energy I had. I cried when she played her first complete scale. My parents moved out 3 months after Grandma died. They didn't wait the full 15 months I had offered. They refused to live somewhere with so many painful memories. I believe they couldn't stand the reminder of what they had lost. They purchased a small condominium across town. My father's business was struggling, reduced to half its former size. My mother joined a different social club where no one knew about our family history. We didn't speak. Distance, not anger. Some gaps are too big to bridge. But I wasn't bitter. Bitterness is exhausting. And I had a life to lead. In the evenings, I would sit at the piano and play until the stars appeared. Chopin, Bach, or simply improvised melodies that went nowhere and everywhere. Grandma's presence remained in those moments. In the scent of lavender from the garden she had planted. In the creak of the old floors. In the way the sunlight fell through the windows at sunset. She was gone, but she was present everywhere. And I was finally free. 9 months after the funeral, my phone rang. Haley. I waited 3 rings before answering. Natalie. Her voice sounded different. Smaller. Less certain. Haley. Silence. 29 years of sisterhood reduced to awkward pauses. I'm not calling to ask for anything, she finally said. I wanted to say something. Okay. I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened, especially how I acted. She took a shaky breath. I was really angry at first. At you. At Grandma. At everyone. I thought you had taken something from me. And now, another pause. Now I work at an entry-level marketing firm. I take the bus because I can't afford a car. And I've started going to therapy. Her laugh was hollow. My therapist says I have a lot of unpacking to do. Regarding Mom and Dad. Regarding how I was raised. About why I thought I deserved everything without having earned it. I didn't respond. I just listened. It turns out being the favorite isn't a gift. It's a trap. I'm glad you're working through it, I replied. I'm not asking you to forgive me. Her voice cracked. I don't deserve that. I just wanted to let you know that I now understand why you did what you did. And why Grandma did what she did. Grandma loved you too, Haley, I added gently. She just couldn't reward behavior that hurt other people. I know, a sniffle. I know that now. We sat silently for a moment. If you ever want to talk, I said slowly, I'm ready to listen. But reestablishing trust takes time. I understand. Good. We hung up without saying goodbye, not out of rudeness, but because neither of us knew how. Some doors, once closed, opened slowly. But they may still open. It's spring now, 13 months after Grandma entered hospice. Tonight, I'm sitting at my piano while the sun sets over the garden. The windows are open, and a warm breeze carries the aroma of jasmine and freshly cut grass. I play Grandma's favorite nocturne, the one she performed at her last concert 22 years ago. The notes drift through the quiet house, replacing the silence with something softer. I think about everything that has happened. The betrayal. The reveal. I never thought I'd have the courage to set those boundaries. I think of Grandma, her strength, her patience, her quiet determination to protect me even when I wasn't aware I needed it. I imagine my parents in their small condo, rebuilding a life that will never be exactly what they envisioned. About Haley, riding the bus, discovering for the first time what it means to earn something. I don't hate them. Hate consumes too much energy, but I don't need them anymore. And that is a level of freedom I never expected to find. The nocturne ends. The final notes linger in the air before fading into the evening quiet. I look at Grandma's photo on the piano. At 62, she was radiant, her fingers poised over the Steinway keys. "I'm fine, Grandma," I whisper. "I'm more than okay." I'd like to think she hears me. I close the piano lid, stand, and go to the window. The stars are just starting to appear. Pinpricks of light in the darkening sky. I don't have the original piano. I don't have the family I thought I did. But I've got something better. I've got myself. I have boundaries. I live a life based on truth rather than silence. And that is the true inheritance Grandma left me. And that, my friends, is my story.